We're going to have to wait a little longer. We're still trying to get to a quorum before we begin, so let's give it a few more moments, please. And here's Danielle and Peter.
So Victor, you didn't need the break that Randy needed, huh, from our last meeting. So you hop right back on. Randy and Victor and I were just on a call together.
Yeah, I know.
We must have worn Randy out.
Okay, people are gonna, Chair Taylor, if you're okay, people I think will still join, but we have at least a quorum, so I think to be respectful, since we have a full agenda, we should get started. Are you in agreement?
I've seen it as having no choice. I'm in agreement, yes. Yes, let's get started.
Right answer, great. So good morning, everyone. Based on what I see on the Zoom, it appears that we have a quorum, and I'm now going to call the meeting to order. So I'm going to begin with the roll call. Chair Taylor?
Here.
Danielle Sidnor?
Here.
Stephen Cavanagh?
Here.
Randall McShepard?
Here.
Phyllis Harris?
Here.
Reverend Chalker?
Here.
Levine Ross?
Here.
Marcia Maccabee, she is not on yet, but she has emailed me. She may be running a few minutes late. So Marcia, you're not on yet, are you? Okay. Janice Contreras?
Here.
Victor Ruiz?
Here.
Dr. Heidi Gullett?
Here.
Dr. Heidi Gullett, is it Gullett or Gullett?
It's Gullett.
I thought so. I tell everyone that. Good, okay.
No worries, however you say it is fine.
Okay. Cordell Stowe?
Here. Here.
Good morning, Cordell. India Pierce Lee? Sheila Wright, she also indicated she may be a few moments late. Sheila, are you on yet? Excuse me, Rabbi Joshua Caruso, he's going to be joining us at 11, as is Yanela Sims. And Habiba Grimes is excused for today. So we do have a quorum. I'm going to now turn to our moment of silence and reflection. This month, I'd like to take a moment to reflect upon the life of Andre Hill. Mr. Hill was an unarmed 47-year-old Black man shot and killed on December 22nd, 2020, by a 19-year veteran white Columbus police officer named Adam Coy. On December 22nd, 2020, the Columbus police were dispatched to a non-emergency disturbance call in response to someone, quote, continuously restarting a gray SUV, close quote. The body camera footage released shows a Columbus police officer entering the garage of the residence where Mr. Hill was a guest. The police officer walks towards Mr. Hill, who is clearly holding a cell phone, and fires multiple shots. The heartbreaking video shows Mr. Hill did not receive medical aid for at least 5 minutes following the shooting, and instead laid in the garage, grasping for breath without any of the responding officers administering care. I think we're having an Amber Alert.
We are.
I'm going to continue, though. The autopsy report released by the Franklin County coroner states the cause of Mr. Hill's death as homicide. And to quote the Columbus police chief, Andre Hill should be alive today. Columbus Mayor Andrew Giffner called for the immediate termination of Officer Coy, saying he was, quote, outraged by the shooting. I am also disturbed about what I don't see next in the body-worn camera footage, Ginther said. From what we can see, none of the officers initially at the scene provided medical assistance to Mr. Hill, no compressions on the wounds to stop the bleeding, no attempts at CPR, not even a hand on the shoulder and an encouraging word that medics were en route. Adam Coy was fired from the Columbus Division of Police, and last week, the former officer was indicted on 1 count of murder and commission of a felony, 1 count of felonious assault, and 2 counts of dereliction of duty. Andre Hill's death is a tragic reminder of the importance of this council's work. Let us take a moment of silence and reflect upon the tragic loss of life of Andre Hill. Okay, thank you. I also can see on the Zoom that Yanela Sims, good morning, you've joined us.
Good morning.
And good morning, Marcia Maccabee. I see that you've joined as well. And I also see that India Pierce-Lee has joined, so good morning to you as well.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm going to move now into the public comment. Since our last meeting, we received 2 public comments submitted via email to equity@cuyahogacounty.us. I forwarded the emails to the case's members on December 21st and January 15th. As I mentioned during all of our meetings, members of my staff always acknowledge receipt of each comment received via return email, and for those who request a meeting, Chair Taylor and I meet with those individuals. As is also my office's protocol, we sent emails acknowledging we received the public comments, the 2 that I referenced above. Executive Budish, would you like to open the meeting with any comments, sir?
Sure, thank you, Clerk Bird. So first, I just want to thank everyone again for your continuing excellent work on this effort. Your hard work is really excellent, and it's showed very clearly in the report that you all issued, which at least anecdotally, I've gotten very nice, very good responses. People recognize the work you're doing and appreciate it. We are continuing in the county to undertake efforts to enhance equity along the lines, in part, of the conversations that this commission has undertaken. So we are in the process of creating a diversity department. We will be, I don't think it's been submitted to council yet. I see Councilman Miller on. I don't think it's been submitted, but it will be soon. We have asked Lenora Lockett, who is currently the Director of Procurement and Diversity, to head up our diversity department once it is created, and it will be a cabinet level position. She will do a great job, I believe, if she's confirmed. We are preparing an ordinance creating the department, as I mentioned, and a second ordinance defining responsibilities of the department, both of which will be going to council. And we're preparing a resolution for the departments to consider projects with an equity lens. We're hoping every department will do that as they consider whether it's a road project or an economic development project or any building project, anything that we're doing. And finally, we have put out an RFP for training on diversity and inclusion throughout the county. And I don't think we've gotten the responses back, but we should be getting those back soon. Clerk Bird is shaking her head. We haven't gotten those back yet, have we?
We have not.
Okay.
We have not.
Okay. So that's my report. Thank you for your good work, and I look forward to many more great things coming out of this commission.
Thank you very much, Executive Budish. Chair Taylor, would you like to address the council, or would you prefer that we delve into the new business?
Just a few minutes, if you don't mind. First, once again, and we've said it numerous times, County Executive Budish, thank you for your work and your effort here. The partnership has been great. You've been candid with this council along the way, and that's certainly appreciated. While we won't be able to accomplish it all, which is our desire, as quickly as we can, you've been thoughtful about all the requests. And again, please accept our gratitude for your willingness to not only partner, but to see things with an open mind around how we move this county forward. So we're grateful for that. A few other things. I do want to just talk about what's happened since the release of the report. We'll get into some details with respect to the communications piece and then the individual committee reports. But you all know that we did have the middle of January, a city club forum. So thank those who joined me in the city club forum, 200 plus participants. They had 17 or so questions asked from that forum. And I think it was a good outlet for individuals who had heard from this council previously a chance. Also, if they hadn't, of course, they were then compelled to read the report. Lots more to come, but I'm grateful. What I want now, though, is for any of you who perhaps aren't committee chairs to offer any comments or thoughts, not only with respect to the report, what you've heard subsequent to the report, and any other thinking around it. So I'll open it up just for a minute or two if anyone has any comments relative to progress or I'll call it conditions to date.
Well, the one comment that I have heard is a great appreciation for the report that we filed, at least from the individuals that I know that have read it. But the other thing was now it's an RFP that's out, and Mr. Budish said we were going to get there will be response, but the idea of having a uniform equity training across the county with standards for all persons in the county, I think that's been received very well.
Thank you, Reverend Chalker. Any other comments? I am going to call on Randall McShepard in just a moment, because so many efforts in this community, I think, lie up against or buttress the work of CASE efforts that were started well before, but good progress being made on a number of fronts. And one of the things I want Randy to talk about not only is his overall efforts in the community and beyond, but the work of Policy Bridge and how it ties together. Again, this is not a Policy Bridge discussion, but it certainly informs our work and I believe aids us in so many ways. Any other comments before I give Randy a few seconds?
I had a quick question related to like public comments. Correct me if my recollection is not correct, but did we previously read the comments in our meetings? And and we don't do that anymore, or just curious on like our review of public comments, and then obviously, you know, any action or anything that we want to do with public comments. Just had a question related to, do we review those or not, as far as like reading them formally in our meetings and acknowledging them?
Denise, we've done both, quite honestly. We read them at, I think, the first meeting or so, and then I think we skipped them a meeting or two. Do you have them available right now, Clerk Bird?
I can get the two that I was sent previously, and you are correct, Chair Taylor. When we read them, it was because there was usually one that was very short. So when there's multiple ones, I try to send them out in advance. But I have them. Would you like me to read them into the record?
Yeah, so I guess the point is we love long questions. We just don't have time to read them.
Right, so, and I guess my point is just like, let's have some consistency on how we want, you know what I mean? Like how we want to handle them. I'm like sitting in this meeting and I'm getting a text message from a community person saying, what happens to reading the comments? So like, I just want to, you know, people, if we do it one way, let's just go.
If I could just add something though, just so you understand, you can do whatever you want. This is an independent council. But I will tell you that the precedent set by the county council has been to not read comments, but to do what Clerk Bird is doing, which is distributing them.
Okay.
And the basis, so we should have that conversation. The basis for that precedent is because you might have too many comments, or if you don't read them verbatim, there might be an issue.
I would, ask Councilman Miller, but, because I'm not part of council, but my understanding was that in part it was because of what you just stated, but also in part because, sometimes you get comments which you can't, respond to, and they're not, fair to people. You know, sometimes they name people's names, you know, things like that. So I think that council thought it best to just distribute them.
That's good guidance. So that definitely helps, Janice, and hopefully that helps inform what you're reading from a text standpoint, because it
Yeah, no, totally. I guess it gives an answer to whoever the viewer is,
right,
you know.
it can work both ways.
But I do, we are, we're a citizen council, so I just want to make sure that we are, you know, acknowledging, you know, and so whatever methodology we choose, you know, I'm fine with, but that we also set some precedents on consistency and what exactly are we going to do. If we just say, hey, we acknowledge that we got 3 comments submitted by X, Y, and Z, and then, you know, we've gotten a copy to review them, that's fine. Just again, making sure that we're consistent so that, you know, folks get that we are acknowledging their comments and so forth. So thank you, Naila and Chair.
So, if I may, just a brief comment that this is an item that is still under discussion at County Council, and there's multiple views on this subject. So I think that your commission should feel free to handle this whichever way you feel is best.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair Taylor, I have the comments in front of me. What would you like me to do today?
Today, I would say, then I'm not going to share prerogative, we will talk about it, but I would say if we could read the names of those issuing the comment, that they offered a comment, then refer people to the website where the comments will be posted. I think that's in fairness to, we can't do that.
The comments are not posted on the website. The comments are distributed to each council member in advance of the meeting as soon as we receive them, but they are not posted.
All right, so.
Can I offer a suggestion?
Please.
Can, at the beginning of the meeting, acknowledge the individuals who sent comments to us, so that anybody that's viewing this that sent in a comment knows that we did acknowledge that, and then we can discuss beyond that point, you know, how we're going to proceed in reference to reading them or not. But I think we should at least at the beginning of the meeting just acknowledge the comments that were received from X date to X date, and then move on from that point.
That was the first part of my point. The second part, I misunderstood. I thought they were on the website. They're not on the website. Let's not read the comments today, okay? But if we can, at some point before this meeting is over, indicate who sent the comments, and we will go from there. All right?
Is there any reason they can't be on the website, Chairman?
The only question I have about that is, what do we do if someone specifically asks that their comment be kept confidential? Do we respect that and keep it confidential?
We have to. Well, I imagine we have to.
And Member McShepard, I can defer your question to the law to our legal counsel, who I thought was on the stream, whether or not.
Okay.
I think you asked whether or not the comments should be posted, correct? Or could we post
Correct.
them?
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't want the general public to believe that they take time to submit thoughtful comments that are forever relegated to some black hole, never to be seen again. They need to know that their comments are heard and respected, in my humble opinion.
And that was exactly the follow-up of the comment that I got from a current viewer, is that the problem is that they're not posted. So if we don't read them, then obviously they don't, you know, the public never knows what that comment was. So if we could check on that, like, is there a legal reason, or can we not? I think that would help have some transparency with comments, you know, with the public. And then like that, it takes off the responsibility of having to read them, but at least acknowledge them at the beginning of our meeting. So thank you.
I will, as I'm sitting here now, I'm instructing one of my staff members to get in touch with, someone from the law department. As I mentioned, they should have been on the call. I am sure that if they are available, they will be joining, and we could probably likely get a quick answer before the, meeting is over.
So we are a Citizens Advisory Committee or Council. So as a Citizens Advisory Council, we will find a way to acknowledge comments that are sent to us, whether they are read publicly in this forum or presented in some other form. We will find a way. Again, we have to accept that the language won't always be pleasant. We will have to take some discretion around those things which are either hurtful, malicious, or flat out inappropriate. But we will acknowledge that we have a role as part of the citizenry to acknowledge comments made to us, okay? And we will do that.
Yeah, Chairman Taylor, to your point, maybe we could just provide some bulleted items that spell out sort of the proper procedure for submitting comments, and make sure that, you know, we say things like that there's, you know, we're not looking for name calling, you know, but rather constructive, you know, feedback, whatever we decide. But I think if people know that, they can't be surprised or angered when their comment might be, you know, eliminated or edited.
I think, quite honestly, Janice, this is a great conversation. It brings us back to our purpose, in part. So if there are other comments on this subject, certainly willing. Now, we haven't, go ahead, please, County Executive.
I just wanted to, whatever you decide is fine. If you decide you want to read them or post them, I would just suggest that you only do that if they're signed, not if they're submitted with no signature.
Great point.
Yeah. Again, going back to what the old, you know, letters to the editor rules used to be.
That's a great point. Agreed. So, Clerk Byrd, tell me about the appropriateness of the two questions you have before you. Do you have them?
Okay, I gave them back. Hold on, let me get them again. One is from a woman, Phyllis Benjamin, who sends comments regularly, so you've received them. And the other is a student, a Cleveland Marshall law student candidate 2021. Okay, so please briefly read both questions, accepting that you're going to editorialize if necessary. Sure. The first one was received on December 17th, 2020 at 4:06 p.m. from Phyllis Benjamin. Executive Budish, Chairman Taylor, Ms. Byrd, Ms. Brown, subcommittee chairs, and all council members. I wish to thank you for all that you are doing to explore issues of racial equity in our county. Your research is outstanding. I commend you for your leadership in revealing the history of discrimination and bias. As a formal equal education opportunity officer, and now as an organizational member focused on racial barriers, I am primarily interested now in youth engagement. I spent many years convening training and implementing changes to raise awareness and implement changes for equity in educational institutions. I value these opportunities as a senior county citizen to follow the council's work in 2021. Happy holidays and New Year. Sincerely, Phyllis W. Benjamin. And there's a phone number. Anyone have an objection to that message at all? Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Benjamin, if you're listening to this.
Thank you. All right.
And Ms. Benjamin is definitely listening and watching as she's communicated with us during the meeting so far. The second one is from a young woman, Elizabeth Marshall. It was received on Tuesday, January 12th at 1:43 p.m. And it reads, "Thank you for forming this committee and publishing this report. I am eager to know how the county plans to implement the suggested changes. I do urge the county to devise a plan to assist low-income and inner-city students with distance learning as soon as possible. It's been nearly a year since distance learning started, meaning our students have lost nearly a year of the level of education they deserve. I believe the city and county must work together in some way to implement support for students, and I would like to see that happen immediately. As far as criminal justice, specifically bail reform goes, The immediacy with which the county must act on decreasing the jail population is more important than ever. Jails are rampant with COVID diagnoses due to overcrowding and the resulting inability to comply with social distancing requirements. That low-level, nonviolent, innocent until proven guilty offenders are exposed to a fatal virus because of their inability to post bail constitutes cruel and unusual punishment. Judges should consider a number of factors when posting bail, but most importantly, they should consider whether the defendant poses a threat to himself or the community and his ability to pay based on income. Determining bail based on a defendant's income rather than a blanket set amount for an offense is an equitable approach to bail that ensures defendants from all economic backgrounds will face the same detriment posed by bail. For a defendant living below the poverty line, a $5,000 bail would be near impossible to post. On the other hand, the same bail amount for a middle-class individual earning $50,000 to $60,000 a year would pose a significantly light burden. I believe this is exactly the kind of inequity the council was created to address, and at this time, it needs to be addressed immediately. I'm happy to discuss my view on this further and look forward to seeing what action the county takes in the coming weeks. Elizabeth Marshall, JD candidate 2021, Cleveland Marshall College of Law, she, her pronouns.
Well, thank you, Ms. Marshall. Thank you, Ms. Benjamin, for those comments, and both weighty comments and thoughtful as well. And as you heard, the length of the comments and questions might be prohibitive in terms of us getting through a meeting, but to you, Ms. Contreras, I appreciate you bringing it up. We will figure out a way to get through our own consternation on this issue and still be responsive to those citizens that have offered comments. Thank you, Clerk Byrd. Just very briefly before we move on to Councilman Miller, thank you once again for your time. Mr. McShepard, I would like to hear from you in just a few moments in terms of the work you have going on, because I think it's relevant to so much of what's happening, not just you, but Danielle and Marcia and others. I think this is an appropriate forum just to talk through things that are happening.
Yeah, well, I certainly would be remiss to offer comments about what's happening from a quality of life perspective without hearing from my good friends Danielle and Marcia, because they are certainly leading the charge. Policy Bridge, I think you wanted me to touch on briefly, and I'll do that. Policy Bridge is a African-American-led think tank that has been focused on analyzing and responding to public policy from a minority perspective for the last 17 years. And there are a few intersections that speak to the work that we're doing, as well as the focus of case that I think stood out for Eddie as we were talking earlier about some of the work in Policy Bridge. First of all, there was a Policy Bridge report written in 2009 called Rebuilding Blocks that talked about the foreclosure crisis and the fact that there would be all this available land due to homes being demolished and what was happening on urban city streets. And one of the recommendations in that report was that perhaps vacant land could be assembled and converted into something like an urban farm. And that is what led to the creation of the Rittal Green Partnership, which is an urban farm in Cleveland that started with 1.3 acres and now has 15 acres, which includes everything from an EPA licensed compost facility to spin-off business that is a fish hatchery for tilapia fish, to now a restaurant and special events center, all on this campus on 82nd and Kinsman, where you could be shocked to know that much activity was going on. So that, of course, feeds into this whole issue of healthy food access, which is one of the 4 pillars of the quality of life subcommittee of this group. So I'm certainly looking at that work of the farm and what it has taught me and taught us about the importance of healthy food access. The farm also runs a farmers market in Maple Heights, Ohio, which was suddenly closed this past summer, and we reopened it. It otherwise would be a food desert community, and we now run a 7-day-a-week farmers market providing fresh produce for residents, not only in Maple Heights, but they come from Cleveland and other suburban communities. Policy Bridge will be resuming its work that it started last year but had to stop because of the COVID issue. But we are going full throttle with the establishment of an urban agenda that will highlight many of the pressing issues that must be confronted. Not to suggest for a minute that those aren't issues that we talk about as a case group, because they are very similar in many ways, but we will be doing a more formal agenda document. And finally, we were just selected yesterday as the organization that will lead an effort on behalf of Cleveland Neighborhood Progress of developing a neighborhood platform representing the views of all CDCs and neighborhood groups in a way that could be presented to mayoral candidates to ensure that conversations about quality of life in neighborhoods are heard and hopefully factored into any plans or platforms that mayoral candidates might put forth. The last thing I'll say is I know a couple of folks know about this, but I was involved working with Senator Sandra Williams for the last couple of years, and we were able to get a piece of legislation through, and at the end of December 22nd to be exact, it crossed the final hurdle, and it was signed by the governor a couple of weeks ago. But it was titled the Civilian Interaction Bill, and it's basically a bill that says that four key components of that bill. One, that safety officers, when they go through their training, will have detailed language about how they interact with civilians during traffic stops, and the rights of civilians will be documented there as a reminder or for safety officers that they need to be obviously more mindful, careful, cognizant of how they interact with the public. Secondly, the driver's manual that every young person gets that they use to learn the laws and prepare for their temp test will now have language included in it that addresses traffic stops and what to do if stopped by the police and what their rights are. Thirdly, the legislation states that the Department of Public Safety and the Ohio Department of Education will ask every high school in the state to incorporate a class or a workshop that teaches high school students what to do if stopped by the police, what their rights are, and will include even role plays. And then finally, driver's education programs will also be encouraged, if not mandated, to ensure that they have a component of the driver's education that addresses traffic stops and, again, their rights, as well as what they could do to ensure that those stops are harmless. So those are just a few of the things that Policy Bridge is involved with, and I think hopefully, Eddie, that's what you were looking for. Again, Marcia and Danielle can give you 3 times more in terms of the things that the NAACP and the Urban League are doing, but hopefully that gives you a feel for some of the things that we're doing at Policy Bridge. Thanks. It does. Thank you very much. And we will certainly give others an opportunity in the future. I hope you join me in believing that this was a worthwhile segment to this discussion, because it's an update on so many wonderful things that all of us are working on. We are prideful, and we are so pleased with the effort that we're undertaking with CASE. You don't have to raise your hand, County Executive, in just a second. So this is just a supplement to all the great work that we're doing as a part of this council. So I just wanted you to hear that story. County Executive, I'm sorry, please.
I just wanted to say that if you haven't had a chance to go out to the Ritol, it is one of the most impressive things you'll see. The work that they're doing out there, I was floored when I went out there. I've been out there a couple times now. Randall gave me the tours, and it's fascinating and impressive, and it'll give you a lift to see what's going on. So I just encourage it if you can get out there to do that.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. And I appreciate everyone's indulgence as well. If there are no other questions before we move to Councilman Miller, that would, we'll move right.
The only thing Chair Taylor, and you can just direct me as to what you would like to happen. I have had my staff reach out to the Law Director, Greg Huth, who has joined us for this call, and I don't know if we want to present the question to him now, or would you prefer that I follow up with him offline? First of all, Greg, thank you very much for jumping on last minute, and I want to be just respectful of his day and time.
Well, yeah, certainly we want to be respectful of the councilman's time as well. So if Mr. if you could give us 2 minutes worth of response, that'd be great, and we'll get back to you later.
He doesn't know the issue.
Oh, well, go ahead and explain to you.
Greg, there was a question by some of the committee members as to whether or not, as you well know, we receive public comment because this is a public meeting, and we receive this comment via an email that we've set up through the county. And what we had been doing in the past at the initial meeting, because we had received very few comment and it was not lengthy, I had read the comment into the record. Since then, I have been distributing it in advance of the meeting and acknowledging that we received. My staff acknowledges every comment that's received from every individual via email, and also if there is a request made to have a meeting, the chair and I meet with each of those individuals that request a meeting. An issue came up from some of the committee members that they wanted to know, is there any prohibition, legal prohibition, as to why we cannot post these public comments on our website? So that is the question. I don't know if that's something you need to look into or if you have a quick response now, but either way, it's fine with us. Did I, members, correctly encapsulate what your questions are? Just nod your head or something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you, Clerk. I can think of no reason you would be prohibited from posting those. Anything that someone would submit in a public environment such as this would be considered a public record, a public document. So you can certainly post those on your website if you so choose.
If the language is inappropriate or in other ways vulgar, are we able to editorialize or not post that information?
In that case, I would suggest you not post that in its entirety. I wouldn't try and edit it in any way or redact it in any way. Yeah.
Okay, very good.
I think whether you post it is kind of up to you.
Chair, if I could make a quick comment. One of the things that we could also do is just set some parameters on the links, or, and definitely say, one, if we want to consider reading them or not, or because my understanding is when they are read, then they become public record. Even if it's a video, then people can see them and acknowledge them. So whatever decision we make around that, and I believe Randy made a comment on, we could just say, hey, this is the process of submitting a comment, and definitely make some limitations to that, and reserve the right to, not post inappropriate content, as well as hold the confidentiality if people want their comments to be confidential.
We will create those.
Can I jump in here for a second? Actually, I don't know if these are already in your rules, but something along the lines of what she just described should be. And actually, county council has done that. They have rules on what you can do during a public comment period. But I do have a little hesitancy about someone asking that their comment be confidential, because if they submit it to you as a public body, then I don't think they can make that request.
To the county executive's point, if they don't sign it, that represents a separate set of issues. So I think the ways we're saying
that would be one that you could refuse to post, for example.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Greg. Do appreciate your time and response. Sure. We'll get back to this body with those parameters, those guidelines that we've talked about. Councilman Miller, please. The floor is yours, sir.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair Taylor and Clerk Byrd and members of the council. It's truly an honor and a privilege to have the opportunity to present before your council. And I would start by saying that I have read your fine report that you issued a few weeks ago, and I know you wanted it widely distributed. So I have an email list of about 1,000 people, and I sent it to everybody, and I know that some people read it and came back with some positive comments, and I know that you came up with some excellent recommendations in the area of health and jobs and contracting and quality of life and criminal justice that provide a roadmap for us going forward. And what I would like to present is a concept on how we can tie these things together and get them all working toward a common purpose and reinforcing each other rather than working in isolation. And so, if I may, I would like to share my screen.
Are you doing that? Share screen. You should be able to do that if you just hit share, Councilman. Is that working? There we go.
Okay, do you have the first slide saying collective impact and backbone organization?
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. So, collective impact is a strategy for making community. Hold on just a minute. Okay. Okay, collective impact is a strategy for making a community-wide effort to deal with a problem that impacts many organizations and systems. For organizations to create lasting solutions to social problems on a large scale, they need to coordinate efforts around a clearly defined goal. Systemic racism is such a problem. It affects everyone, all organizations and many systems, including workforce, contracting, education, healthcare, mental health and addiction, criminal justice, housing, food access, and more. So, the history of collective impact is that collective impact is a concept that developed within the community of foundations and organizations that work with foundations. In 2011, John Kania and Mark Kramer published the first article on collective impact in the journal Stanford Social Innovation Review. Since then, collective impact initiatives have been applied to education, health and healthcare, animal care, homelessness, poverty reduction, and youth and community development. And Partners in Progress, an arm of the City Foundation, has supported several collective impact initiatives. The White House Council for Community Solutions identified collective impact as a transformational concept that has shown measurable positive results. So, Hank Rubin, the author of a 2009 article on collective leadership, distinguishes between collaboration and collective impact. Collaboration is simply when organizations sit together and decide to work on the same project. In collective impact, the organizations agree to a set of shared goals, and then they each go back to their home organizations, and they work with their staffs, their board, their volunteers to develop and implement actions to achieve the goals in their own organizations. So the organizations then shift and align their work, setting changes in motion throughout the community. So, in collective impact, there are 5 essential elements. The first is that it requires a common vision. The second is that there should be shared system of measurement and evaluation so that the organizations that are collaborating together can agree upon what should constitute progress and how it can be measured and how they can act on the results that they're getting to take further actions. The third element is that we want to create mutually reinforcing effects so that the efforts that are being done by each of organizations support the efforts that are being done by the other organizations, and you get a result that moves the community forward as a whole, not a set of isolated impacts. The fourth element is continuous communication. The partnering organizations stay in touch with each other. They share information about their efforts and their results, and they work together collectively. And the fifth principle is what we call backbone support, which is the idea of having an organization that works to convene and coordinate the efforts among the partners. So the backbone organization is one that provides connectivity and facilitation. The backbone organization works to bring the partners together, to aid in identifying the shared vision and the shared systems of measurement. It helps all the participants work together. The backbone organization has to be one that believes that the goals that we're working on are consistent with the organization's mission. It has to be an organization that is willing to provide some of its organizational infrastructure to help make the coordination work. Typically, we don't create a new organization for this purpose. Rather, we identify an existing organization, typically a foundation or a nonprofit, that sees this work as consistent with its mission and is willing to provide the coordination and assistance to help make this work. So, the concept of collective impact has been around for about 10 years, and as I mentioned, it's been used in dealing with a number of different major community problems. But at the same time, there has been some critique of the collective impact model. Particularly community psychologist Tom Wolfe criticized the collective impact model, saying particularly, first, that it does not engage those that are in the community. Secondly, that it's a top-down approach. And third, that it does not include policy change and system change. Tom Wolfe, in an article published in 2017, presented an alternative model for collaboration and equity in justice. He recommended 6 basic principles. Number 1, explicitly addressing social and economic justice and structural racism. Second, using a community development approach in which residents have equal power in decision-making. Third, use community organizing and build resident leadership and power. Fourth, focus on policy systems and structural change. Fifth, build on prior research on what works to bring social change. And finally, that the convener should provide only basic facilitative structures. So, Wolfe model, when he presented it as an alternative model, a different approach to collective impact. However, his ideas can also be used as a way of extending and improving the concept of collective impact and making it work effectively in dealing with racial equity. And this is certainly something that works well for us in government, because we in government are part of the county's institutional leadership. We're not a community organizing organization, but we can collaborate with those who are. Following that same approach, the organization Living Cities partnered with the Collective Impact Forum to update collective impact to include an equity frame, which is what I recommend also that we do here. So, the first recommendation that I would make to your council is that we apply an upgraded community impact model to deal with racial equity. It would use the 5 core principles of community impact that we presented earlier, plus the following 3 additions. First, that we include grassroots advocacy organizations such as the Greater Cleveland Congregations as part of the coalition that we put together. Second, that we pursue advocacy and policy change in addition to internal organization work, and that we work on both levels. And third, that we make community leadership development a primary strategy. And the second recommendation is that we create a backbone organization to help us convene a broad coalition of partners to work together on racial equity. This will enable us to develop a program that is mutually reinforcing and that involves the entire community, not just our own internal governmental structures. We should seek an existing organization, most likely a nonprofit or a foundation. And the roles of the backbone organization should be to facilitate the identification of shared goals and objectives, shared measurement systems and evaluation strategies, and effective communications among the partners. So this completes my presentation. I appreciate your time and attention, and I would be happy to try to answer any questions and welcome any discussion.
Thank you, Councilman Miller. Thank you for that presentation. It was great, certainly informative. These concepts and notions we've sort of dealt with, perhaps in independent or separate ways, but the way presented certainly makes sense from a backbone standpoint, so that we get the kind of collective impact you described that we know is possible. Any questions for Councilman Miller before we move on? Any questions at all? Okay. I have no questions. I'm sure we will have questions subsequently, Councilman. And if you don't mind, if we get back to you after folks have a chance to not only review this material in more detail, but digest its importance. And if you want to share the slides with Clerk Byrd, that would be great as well. And then we'll continue to talk about it because we know it's important.
Yes, I would. Yes.
I was just going to request, because we've actually received a couple of quick texts and emails, if you're comfortable, if you could please send me your slide deck and I will distribute it to all of the members, that would be awesome.
And is it nbird@cuyahogacounty.us.
It is, Councilman, yes.
Okay, I will send it momentarily.
I appreciate it, and I too want to thank you for your patience and your presentation, which I found to be very informative, so thank you, sir.
And may I stay and hear some more of the meeting?
You may absolutely stay. Do you promise not to Zoom bomb us during our meeting?
Oh, I promise. Okay.
Okay, then you can stay.
All right. Thank you.
I am going to move on, Chair, if that's okay, to the
Please.
approval of the minutes. The minutes from the December 17th, 2020 case meeting were distributed to each of you on January 11th of 2021 for your review and comment. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion of the minutes? Hearing no discussion, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
That last aye, was that an opposed or a late yay? Okay. I'm gonna, the motion carries and the minutes are accepted.
Council members, I have to exit for another meeting. Thank you, Councilman Miller, for your presentation, and I will talk to you all soon. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Since we last met, as Chair Taylor said, the case's first status report was released to the County Executive, County Council, and the community. For those who are listening in, the public can access the report by visiting our website at www.cuyahogacounty.us/fight-racism. As Chair Taylor mentioned, on January 14th, 4 members of the case participated in a virtual forum hosted by the City Club to discuss the report and answer questions from community members. The panel members included Chair Taylor, Subcommittee Chairs Heidi Gullett and Stephen Cavanis, as well as member Habiba Grimes. The event went extremely well. 262 viewers watched the live stream on the City Club's website, and additional viewers watched the video in the City Club's archive following the event. As Chair Taylor said, they received 17 questions, which were shared via email with the panel members, and the City Club's live tweets generated more than 33.3 thousand Twitter impressions. If you were unable to watch the event last month, you can always view it at www.cityclub.org. I'm going to move into the executive orders regarding disparity. Following the release of the case's status report, Executive Budish issued 4 executive orders aimed at instituting a more robust, race-conscious program within Cuyahoga County procurement procedures. Executive Budish briefly discussed these orders in his opening remarks. The executive orders are designed to increase visibility and transparency of the availability of contracts, to ensure the Office of Procurement and Diversity establishes goals for minority-owned businesses, and to expand the county's small business enterprise set-aside programs, which allows for reserving some bids, RFPs, and RFQs solely for SBEs. The executive orders address recommendations in the Cuyahoga County 2020 Disparity Study, which was prepared by Giffen and Strong, as well as recommendations from this council. The 4 executive orders specifically address goals for the MWBE, contracting programs, forecasting of county bids, outreach of contractors and vendors regarding the MWBE program, and expanded use of SBSA program. Chair Taylor, would you like to add anything or discuss the executive orders any further?
No, I wouldn't like to add anything, but we'll pause if anyone has any questions or comments with respect to these executive orders. Okay.
Okay, well,
Great.
hearing none, I just, again, I will thank County Executive on behalf of the council for listening to some of our recommendations and instituting these executive orders.
Yeah, other than to say they all matter, right? And they will matter significantly over the course of time, certainly in response to the disparity study, certainly in response to our work, but also in response to just the good thinking of the executive's office. But in time, these will all have a profound effect, and they'll be strengthened over time as well, but a profound effect on our community. So good work by all.
Executive Budish, before I move on, would you like to add anything to what I stated about your orders?
No, again, I'll appreciate the good explanation you gave, and again, appreciate the work of this council and the other internal committee that helped shape these executive orders. I agree with Chair Taylor that I think they will have a very significant positive impact. Thank you.
Thank you. I have some exciting news to share with this council. Cuyahoga County's application to join the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, otherwise known as GARE, was recently approved, and I'm pleased to announce Cuyahoga County, as well as all of its employees, are now GARE members. For those of you who are not familiar, GARE is a national network of government agencies working to achieve racial equity and advance opportunities for all. GARE, quote, leads with race and believes the creation and perpetuation of racial inequities has been built into government policies and practices. GARE provides tools to put theory around racial equity into practice at a local level through the use of national best practices. Joining GARE provides Cuyahoga County and its employees with access to tools and a network of partners who work to address issues of racial inequity in their communities. As members, all county employees have access to a number of different tools and meetings to support the county's equity work. We have access to a members-only portal, which includes a breadth of resources and tools regarding race and equity, as well as discussion boards where questions are asked and resources are shared. The portal allows users to sign up for regular updates regarding equity news and topics. There are monthly membership calls on the fourth Monday of every month from 3 to 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I plan to attend all monthly calls and can brief the case on the discussions if you like. I attended the January monthly membership meeting on the 25th of the month. During that meeting, the GARE staff provided updates regarding the annual membership conference planned for May 18th through the 21st, which I will attend if my schedule permits, but I will definitely have someone on my behalf attend. They also recommended the book Caste, The Origins of Discontent by Isabel Wilkerson. I believe Councilman McShepard has recommended that book in the past, as well as others. And there was also a presentation on this month's emerging topic, which was COVID-19 vaccine and racial equity. Participants were placed in breakout rooms to discuss various topics, including communications regarding the vaccine and myths about the vaccine. Following the breakout session, the group reconvened and discussed what was talked about in those rooms. Additional information regarding GARE can be found on their website, which is www.racialequityalliance.org. Chair Taylor, any further discussion about the GARE membership or anything related to that?
No discussions for me. It'll be great at some point to hear a fuller, more comprehensive report from you in terms of the work that GARE is doing, and maybe even just it doesn't have to be a case study, but a more in-depth review of a particular component or two of the work and the findings. So we'll look forward to that.
Great. And we are, just to also underscore, we are using some of the information that's publicly available on their website in the communications subcommittee groups and toolkits and other such things. So we are taking advantage. Anything from the members about GARE? Okay.
All right, well, let me just briefly then comment on the Cuyahoga County Equity Commission report. By now, you've all received a copy of the report. I'd like to thank those internal members, Ted Carter, Lenora Lockett, and so many others. You probably have the names before you, Naila, who worked on this. I recognize it was an effort by many. They acknowledged, informed in part by our work. But going forward, we will not only have meetings where we discuss sort of the common components of our findings, how we work together going forward. We're going to have at least one small group discussion between subcommittee chairs and the representatives from that commission to talk. We're going to have a fuller discussion with the entire case. And then at some point in the future, we will invite them to one of our discussions in this format so that they have a forum for not only talking about the reports and the findings, but how we work together. So more to come. If, again, you haven't read it, that includes the public as well, please, I encourage you to read the report from the internal commission. Any comments on that work? All right, great. Well, let's move into our subcommittee reports. And looks like we are starting with, India.
I'd like to actually, Chair Taylor, if we may, can we start with Dr. Heidi Gullett? She has a 11:30 commitment, to jump off. And I'd also like to recognize Rabbi Caruso. Thank you for joining. I see that you've joined our call, so welcome.
Thank you.
Dr. Heidi?
Thank you so much. I am scheduled with patient care, so that's why I'll be stepping off as soon as I see the first person arrive. But our subcommittee, we have discussed the frequency of our meetings in the December meeting prior to releasing our report, and our goal was to have monthly meetings. So a little bit later today, I have an email ready to go out to the rest of the subcommittee members about our monthly meeting schedule, and then we are hopeful to start with the list of interviews that we presented in the case report, which we released with the rest of the subcommittees. We would really like to meet with the CEOs of the hospital systems, not just the individual hospitals, but the actual hospital systems. We find that that is a really important piece that we weren't able to necessarily get at prior to the end of the year, particularly important with COVID and with the way that we're seeing inequities with regard to COVID around race. So we feel like that's really important, and then we'll be moving on to the other community health leaders that we've identified, and then others that may arise. So there clearly, I've had outreach from several different community health leaders about additional data that they and their organizations have, and they feel that our case should be able to review and would be very helpful for all of the committees. So hopeful that we'll be able to meet with all of those individuals who've come forward after reading the report and saying, hey, we have some information we think that would be really helpful to think about what the next steps are. We'll also continue to work with Peter Hoffman, who you'll hear from later, and we're also a part of the Kellogg Racial Equity 2030 grant, which many of you have joined in on the planning for that. And so the goal is that we'd be able to align any of the planning and the resources that come into this community around the work of this declaration, this committee, the Internal Equity Commission, and anybody else working on this, so that in follow-up to Council Person Miller's report, we can really engage through collective impact, which we've been using through HIP Cuyahoga and the community health improvement process since 2014. And we'd like to continue to build on that with the Declaration of Racial Equity as eliminate structural racism and focus on racial equity on the health side since early 2015. We really feel like we're poised as a community to push that work forward, but this committee is a big part of that. So that's kind of where our committee's going. I would open it up to at least two of the other subcommittee members are here, Chair Taylor and Levine, if there's anything else that I've missed or anything else you want to add.
Levine, anything to add at this point? Okay. I think that was comprehensive, great, and as always, appreciate every bit of the effort you're putting towards what we're all trying to accomplish collectively. It's been great working with you and watching and marveling at the energy level and the commitment. So thank you very much, Dr. Gullett. Appreciate it. Go deliver that patient care. Thank you.
I'll be on till I have to jump off.
Okay. All right. Naila?
Why don't we move to the Criminal Justice Subcommittee, India?
Good afternoon, Chair Taylor and County Executive Budish. Over the next 90 days, the Criminal Justice Subcommittee will begin conducting additional interviews with individuals and key leaders in the criminal justice space, specific to our 4 areas of juvenile justice, adult incarceration, and the bail reform, as well as looking at the county prosecutor and county judges. As it relates, we are evaluating and collecting additional data and research that will provide context for the current systems in place. And we will also be looking at national best practices, specifically around bail reform initiatives and how those ecosystems are needed to look at the impacts of the elimination of cash bail for nonviolent offenders, setting caps on bail for misdemeanors, et cetera. As we continue our interviews, we also look at how we integrate with the other CAC subcommittees, as we talked around overlapping areas, such as the racial equity and diversity training you're putting in place, looking at the county's hiring practices, in leadership in other areas. At this time, we are scheduling meetings again with these key leaders and look to make adjustments to our recommendations based on the data that we collect. Any other questions? Any other committee members like to say anything?
India, I would just like, we know it's important, but I'd love to hear context from you or anyone else of how important this bail reform is, right? If we can move the needle on this structurally and in terms of outcomes, results, you may not have the quantifiable, you may not have the data necessarily, but if you could talk anecdotally about how important this is to our society.
Well, I think one of the areas that I want to dig, we'd like to dig deeper is gathering data on how many people, if we can, in the current system are being given cash bail versus personal bonds. And as we have learned that a lot of people shouldn't even be getting the cash bail and at all. So we want to look at that and look at the current system in terms of the level of those bails that are being set. And as we heard from one of the public comments, you know, making it equitable across income levels, because we know a lot of people are put in jail that for misdemeanors or crimes that, you know, don't rise to that level as a felony that shouldn't be, which then, you know, perpetuates them losing their job, family, housing, and other things. So we have a lot of work to do. I think that's the one area we can delve into. The other area I think that's really important is looking at this bind over issue with juveniles and really looking at the data around that and doing more research and investigating those that should be bound over based on history and records and some that may not, and really doing a deeper dive in that area. I think those are the two areas right now that we have a lot of work to do. And I'd open it up to Reverend Chalker or Rabbi Caruso, or if they'd like to add anything to that.
Thank you, India. I think you did a great job representing. There certainly seems to be just in the bail reform realm, there seems to be a sea change nationally in recognizing bail reform as a kind of a biteable, definable action that we could take on criminal justice reform. Particularly the latest news from Illinois eliminating cash bail has been incredibly heartening. Same kind of sort of conversations are going on in New Jersey right now. So this could be an interesting foot in the door for us. So we're looking forward to continuing the research in that particular area. But as Chair Lee says, there's lots of more work to do in other areas. But there is no dearth of work. I mean, it's really going to be about focusing ourselves.
And I think Newark has been the example not only around bail reform but also police reform. They seem to be the model right now around both areas, and that's something we're doing some deeper dives in.
Okay, any other comments or questions for India or from committee members?
I would just throw in there, if I could, Chair, that two people who have been very instrumental in moving us forward so far have been Prosecutor O'Malley, who has really taken some significant steps towards evaluating who might not need to be in jail. And while it's not the formal bail reform that we read about, it's been effective. The other person is Judge Michelle Early of the Municipal Court, Cleveland Municipal Court. She has embraced the Arnold Foundation tool for bail reform and has been implementing it. And apparently, from what I understand, it's gone very, very well, and I think they're very pleased with it. So I would just note those two people have been very helpful so far. among others. I mean,
Taylor?
there's others.
Yeah, Ms. Sidnor?
Yes, and so I guess for the, committee, just a question on the juvenile issue. I know we had some discussion on that, prior. Just curious if there's been any more discussion, about opportunities as we look at remedies that are potentially being offered for the adult system, similar types of remedies for juveniles and minimizing the number of, juveniles who are flowing into the adult system and then just ending up in juvenile, detention period.
And that's what we're doing the research on, the bind over, from juvenile to adult, and then looking at adult incarceration. But we're just starting, continuing interviews, gathering research and data, and looking again at national best practices in this area to make that comparison. And then eventually coming back to this body around, the policy, and then who do we talk to, right, around changing those policies and what's required at those levels.
Thank you.
Ms. Sidnor, I'll just say, and I know I speak for the committee and saying, perhaps there'll be an opportunity for us to meet with you, separately, if you'd like to offer, some thoughts. I know we were on the call, I think, with Prosecutor O'Malley, and we'd love to get your input and your experience on this. I know there's a lot of controversy around the kinds of crimes that are committed, and looking at age, but also the kinds of crimes, and then, Prosecutor O'Malley sort of stating his concern for families of victims, and it's complicated, and but I don't think it's unnavigable. So we'd love to have that opportunity to just share a little bit discreetly if you'd like.
Absolutely, willing to do that.
Great.
Great suggestion. Well, great. Thank you, Chair Lee. Nagala?
Do you want to move on to Phyllis and the Communications Subcommittee?
Please.
Phyllis? Phyllis? Okay.
We move past that one quickly.
Why don't we go to Committee Member McShepard, maybe Equitable Quality of Life Subcommittee, please?
It's a good decision.
Okay, Phyllis, going once, going twice. All right, the Equitable Quality of Life Subcommittee is off and running for 2021. We decided that we would sort of break our work out into quarters. So this first quarter, we want to focus on housing. The second quarter, we'll focus on safe places to be active. And then the third quarter, healthy food access. And the fourth quarter, we would wrap up with transportation. So we're sort of splitting up the different areas of focus for our subcommittee by quarter to allow us to really, take a deeper dive into each of these areas and to better understand the organizations, the players, the needs, the opportunities. So we have submitted a list of organizations that we want to talk to this first quarter, including CMHA, the City of Cleveland Department of Housing, I think a couple of CDCs, and there's another one or two. But basically, wanting to hear from them, what keeps them up at night, what they see as key opportunities, and sort of summarize all of that by the end of the quarter and figure out how to bring it back to the county for further discussion and deliberation. We also agree with Chairwoman Lee's suggestion that it's a good exercise for us to continue to talk with other subcommittees about points of intersection and alignment, and to see where and how we can work together. I think those are the primary areas that we want to sink our teeth into outside of just regular committee meetings, and staying on top of some follow-up activities that we want to do with some of the interviews we did late last year. There's a couple of county leaders that we want to go back and talk to once again, just now that we understand a bit more about their work. We may want to follow up with a few extra questions. But we're off and running. We're excited about it, and we're eager to see what the next year will hold in terms of our learning. And with that, I'll offer to any of the other committee members if they would want to add anything to that. I guess one isn't here with Phyllis, so. But that concludes my report.
Thank you, Chair McShepard. Is there a primary question you want answered with respect to housing, or an observation you want to make? You've gotten lots of detail and data, at least superficial data. I don't know how deep the dive has been, but is there a primary question we need to ask ourselves or others in this area?
I think there's many questions around housing. You know, affordable housing is a big issue. You know, the whole issue of, you know, things like lead and the whole lead coalition will be following up with as well. You know, some of the, well, you were on the call, Chairman Taylor, with some of the housing groups that we met with originally. The income discrimination issue as well, types of you know, income that people can use to pay for housing. I didn't realize until we had our meetings with the groups in the past how big of an issue that was. So, you know, and there's many more, but I'd like to, every group, of course, that you meet with has their own set of issues and priorities.
Right.
So what you hear from a CDC director might be different than what you hear from a Jeff Patterson from CMHA, but, you know, that's probably a good question to ask someone like India, who has spent a lot of time looking at housing, and maybe others on the call. But, yeah, I don't have one. The short answer, Chairman Taylor, is there's not one particular issue that I'm looking at. Just trying to understand the many moving parts.
No, that's fair. There are probably levers to all these things, and they're all interrelated, and we'll hear some of that from Peter later. So no, that's a fair response, that you solve one, then you have the next biggest thing. So I get it. But the affordability question is a good one, and of course the discrimination question, and then the safety within the households, lead and otherwise. So those are big topics, in addition to, you know, the homelessness question as well. Well, good. Thank you. Any other comments for Chair McShepard?
India, I do think one of the areas, you know, as we look at the impacts of COVID around housing and evictions and how much homelessness is going to be affected, as well as stable housing for families being evicted, even though we've had moratoriums and rental assistance and other, it's escalating more than, you know, we could even imagine. So that's going to be a big issue about what happens there, and you know, tenant rights and different things like that. So that's going to be the bigger issue.
Yeah, India, you are spot on with that. There was a big New York Times story this past week that talked about the impact of COVID on women and mothers, and the fact that, you know, in so many urban communities they are holding the families together, essentially holding communities together, and so many of them have been stressed and pulled in so many directions, trying to keep jobs, trying to also proctor, you know, learning and education with their kids being at home. And you read the book Evicted, they talk about, you know, the most likely individual to be evicted in America is an African-American female. So there's a lot to that statement of really paying attention to how this COVID thing plays out and affects communities of color from a housing or homelessness perspective. So that is something that I think is worth paying special attention to, and we might research that a bit further.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all. Next, Clerk Byrd.
Let's move on to Stephen and the Economic Opportunities Subcommittee, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and County Executive. I'd say, you know, over the next 90 to 180 days, thematically probably aligns with my colleagues in terms of really doing more research and data gathering. But for our subcommittee, it's really along the lines of the 3 recommendations that we had. Procurement, looking deeper into some of the public-private partnerships, and then education. So I'd say that's one element of the work. Second one is delving into the intersectionality, which has already been shared across the other committees. And then also, I would say that really beginning to develop a vision of what success looks like for this work long term. And that is through gathering some data with the county and probably some external data points that we've seen. Additionally, beginning to look into additional recommendations for the year-end report, some items that I'd say our subcommittee tabled just because we didn't have enough information to really provide a sound, solid recommendation for the first round. I think an additional theme that we felt we need to better understand is our external impact. I think the purpose of our council is to really largely impact the external elements of racism. And so, trying to really branch out and add value. And so I guess the question is, how does the county, how can we as a council create an environment that either directly provides direct oversight or has influence over some of our community partners and the work they're doing, so that it comes up in various issues such as procurement, education, and other elements. So from a public policy perspective, what can be implemented, what sort of tables can we be around to maybe influence some race equity changes in the community. So with that, that's largely what we've talked about and are beginning to schedule meetings to start work. So appreciate it. Any additional comments from my colleagues?
Steve, I would just add that we talked a lot about the fact that the county has maybe certain limitations on what it can mandate for other municipalities within the county, but really using itself as an example and influence to help drive change through out municipalities, because you understand the county government can do certain things inside of its institution, but if we can also make sure in every corner of the county, municipalities start to act and adopt some of the things that the county does, it could really be impactful for individuals that are not just doing business directly with the county.
I was not at our last meeting. I had a conflict on Friday with our economic development meeting, but there's one thing that I did want to, and it's kind of just general. Obviously, it touches our subcommittee, but really touches all of the committees around housing, around jails, around everything. Is really CARES Act and COVID and the county's funding. CARES Act funding for that, so $215 million of CARES Act dollars, and so obviously we know that there was an extension from the federal government into this year for the utilization of that, and that county council approved 125 million of it, I believe. But I think it's really important for our work, and I don't know exactly how we tie it together, but at least from an educational perspective, it would be nice for this body to have a good understanding on how those allocations have been met as we look at our own issues of equity in our subcommittees and some of the work that has already happened in 2020 related to that. I am a board member of the Center for Community Solutions, and obviously as a policy think tank, they have done a lot of work around looking at the budget and allocations, and definitely always have recommendations. So whether it's an internal mechanism that we have within our county team to just, give us some sort of information on how CARES Act funding has been distributed and what are the plans for the balance, as well as maybe somebody like the Center for Community Solutions and John Corlett's team to also make that, to make the assessment as they've done with their board of directors. I think is important as we lay out our strategy into 2021 and onward, being such a pressing issues around vaccine dissemination, housing, quality of life, and all of the other topics that we've touched on in subcommittee and in our report.
County Executive.
Yeah, if I could just make one comment in response, I want to make sure Janice understands. There is no CARES Act money left from last year. $215 million is gone. We believe we spent it very well, the administration and council. I can be happy to have, we're putting together our listing, in a way that we can show the public how effective it's been. But you may recall that the extension to use the funds was not adopted until late December. So we couldn't wait because otherwise it would have gone back to the federal government had they not finally extended. So we didn't want that to happen. So there were plenty of places to spend the money. And, we funded everything from a lot of money to rental assistance, mortgage assistance, small business grants. We did a lot of PPE. We did testing in underserved areas. And you can go through the list. As I said, the money was, I think, very well spent and very important for our safety of our citizens here. We're hoping that there will be another stimulus package adopted, which gives money to the local and state governments. That is not altogether clear that will happen. If you've been following the national news, the Biden administration has proposed a significant additional stimulus, which would include funds for local governments. But the Republicans in the Congress are not excited about sending money to local governments or state governments. So what will happen, I don't know. We did receive at the end of December an amount, something like $25 million, but that was not like the prior CARES money, which gave us flexibility how to spend it. This money has to be used for designated purposes, which include rental assistance. So there may be, we've already allocated, I believe, something like $3 million of that to extend our rental assistance program that we started last year. And I was going to add to what Randall was saying was, if there's things that, as you come up with it, if you keep your eye on the CARES money requirements, if there's programmatic things that you all recommend, we'd be happy to consider that. And the other point I would make is we are in I think, a very exciting time with Congresswoman Marcia Fudge becoming the head of HUD, which again may help us with housing down the road. So.
Thank you for that. And I think more so just making sure that we have an understanding on what that was and also set out some priorities as it intersects our work and the funding opportunities become available. We could be better prepared to be responsive and impactful. So thank you for your leadership and thank you for that.
And the spending, I should make clear, was almost, I don't know, I want to say almost all, but much of the funds were equity oriented. So just for example, the small business support program that we put in place, I think it was something like 40 or 50% of those grants went to minority owned businesses. Our testing program, which was $5 million, we saw that underserved areas were not getting the testing that they needed. So we partnered with Metro Health and the Board of Health, and all of that went to underserved areas. So we've been very focused on equity throughout the CARES spending.
Yeah, I think Janice brings up a good point, and I think it would be helpful if we just stay ahead of the possible support that the county gets, and it sort of brings up another topic that we discussed yesterday in a meeting about how this council serves as a voice or communication medium with the community, right? So citizens talking to citizens, and from a procurement perspective, how we can play a role in sharing the opportunities that are available for businesses. And the question is, with CARES Act, how can we add value for the county in terms of the deployment and messaging, accurate messaging of how the county is using those dollars in an equitable manner. So that's my perspective.
Great, Stephen. Thank you for your committee as well. And to piggyback on what you were just saying, after we get through Peter's comments, because you're the most recent group to meet with Peter on the systems mapping, maybe you can talk about your findings, discovery, or feelings post our discussion yesterday. So let's move now to Dr. Hovmand and systems mapping for an update, please, Peter.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Chair Taylor. So last time I presented was in end of November, and thought there's a lot of work that's happened since with the interviews and how the mapping has unfolded. In addition to the work that Heidi is also involved with and leading the Cross-Sector Innovations Collaborative, we've had more meetings and group model building. So I just wanted to give an update about where we are in terms of process, what's coming up for the spring, brief update on the systems map, and then immediate next steps. So in addition to the cross-sector innovation initiative that is, we've had a number of meetings, and that group will expand. This is the group that's been working on the large system map that we've been looking at. That group is expanding with more outreach in terms of to community-oriented sessions for the spring. And I'll be reaching out to folks about this if you're interested in being involved in that as well, in terms of shaping this and being more involved in the mapping itself. In terms of an overview, we have system maps from the interviews, so there's quite a few. I think it's over 30 interviews now that the summaries have been incorporated and mapped out. There's the map that I was talking about with the group model building from the CSII project. The number of reports that are being incorporated into the mapping, including diversity report and so on, that's also coming in, and then in the online meetings and public forums. So this is ongoing, and as you're continuing to conduct interviews, that'll be incorporated into this work. The next step here is for the spring is really consolidating the systems map and also generating subcommittee specific maps. And it was a great helpful conversation yesterday. I think what we'll try to show is not only what's in the subcommittee's purview, but also what other elements are impacting that, things like that are cutting across. The other piece that'll start to happen, this is already happening a little bit with the CSSI work, is mapping solutions, but the recommendations that are coming up in the interviews, as well as the formal recommendations that'll start to appear. I think in terms of informing, being able to support questions and further investigations and consolidate data, identifying potential leverage points, so places where small changes can have a big impact, and then thinking sort of short-term, medium-term, longer-term. So as the map is being evolved, developing, that should be something that's coming up. This isn't an oracle, it's not a predictive tool, but it is helpful for thinking about where are some quick wins, and then what are some next steps. So you can expect to see that happening in the spring, as well as prioritizing potential leverage points and strategies. By June, I expect there to be a working simulation model where you can begin to explore trade-offs and different kinds of interventions. And this would be at an early stage of development. Again, it's not meant to be a forecasting tool at this stage, but it will suggest trends and dynamics that would happen through various strategies and that'll be both a way of getting a sense of what's missing, what kind of data need to be included. It'll also help provide some ideas on metrics and logic model for program evaluation. So Chair Taylor mentioned it may not be possible to sort of see the actual numbers change, but one of the benefits of a system map is you can begin to identify where should we start to see shifts in how some of these reinforcing cycles or balancing cycles are working. What are some leading indicators? What are things that we would be seeing from folks in the community and organizations along those lines? So that should be ready. And I think with respect to the communications piece, any working simulation model should also have an interface that can work on a smartphone or tablet that can help both communicate what the model's about and some of the solutions that's developing. All of this will be at a very early stage of development, so the idea there is to get rapid feedback and begin to develop some tools that are useful for supporting case. Last time I shared the system map from November 30, this is roughly what it looked like at a high level. The piece I want to share, I don't want to go into too much detail, but this is where it currently stands. This is what it'll be evolving. A couple of things in red here are some solutions that have already started to appear in the map from some of the group model building. One thing to note, there are a number of areas we've already identified that need to be addressed. We need a stronger focus on bringing it in education, and that includes from pre-K all the way up to adult education, so thinking about this across the lifespan. There's a structure up here about healing and trauma. Right now, this is sort of at a peripheral, but healing and trauma is actually something that affects multiple places in the system. So from prior work, what I'd expect is as this gets mapped into all the things that healing and trauma would impact, you'll actually see that structure sort of change. So instead of this being peripheral, it'll probably be much more central. And then I've talked a little bit about solutions. Building community capacity is another area here, just to draw your attention to asset-based community development strategies, and then perspective transformations are some of the things that are starting to show up that have already also appeared in some of the work of CASE through the interviews. So this is a moving target. It's evolving fairly quickly, especially with the work that will happen through CSII in the spring. And then just as an example, yesterday I met with the Economic Opportunity Committee and shared a structure, and just as an example, this is looking at just one piece of one structure from the interviews, looking at workforce development and training. When I'm looking at these diagrams, one of the things that I'm also thinking about are other examples of system maps that I've done with other groups. And in this case, what stood out, thinking about workforce development and interviews and training, are particularly are issues around workforce turnover and training and how the resources are being allocated. Two examples jump to mind of where these kinds of systems mapping interventions have made an impact. One was some work in Singapore looking at child welfare foster care workers, where regardless, it seems, how much in resources folks have at a country level, the turnover is pretty high, especially among frontline workers. So we did some work there. And what that led to was really being able to focus on specific places in the system for improving worker retention, which then reduces the upfront training costs, but also allows people to gain experience and reinvest more of the training dollars to developing more skills and capability. So that was that was one example. The other place where this has showed up, this was pre-Brexit, so it's a very different environment now. But reducing out of home placements in the United Kingdom and several local government authorities. And this comes down to the more experience you have workers who are more comfortable, and it shows up in areas here like service organizations, mirroring communities. The higher the tolerance of the risk foster care, the welfare workers are, and the less out-of-home placements, and the more likely you are to also provide the families with support. When the tolerance for risk goes down, you have children being removed, in this case in UK, and out-of-home placements, which is not only disruptive and traumatic, but it has all sorts of other effects, and it's preventable. So focusing here on understanding the role for improving tolerance of risk through better supervision was one of the key insights from that. So I just highlight this to say that these maps, they're sort of in an early stage development, but in other work, they have led to sort of some important insights, and this is just two examples here from this work. There are other examples in areas around bail, court systems, housing. We were just talking about housing, so and then education. I'm happy to share any examples like that. Immediate next steps is continue to meet with subcommittees and really valuing that. Heidi Gullett mentioned the Kellogg Racial Equity Grant application, so this is part of that. And then the third piece here is really developing opportunities for learning system dynamics and participation. So that's an important part as this work moves forward. Some people this resonates and people want to learn more. For other people, they have other areas that they want to pay attention to, but I want to make sure that there are opportunities for anybody who's interested to learn more and participate in the mapping process, and I'm happy to talk about opportunities or if you have ideas on that. Yeah, so I'll end there.
Thank you, Peter, for that update. And I think if nothing else, and I'd like for Stephen's committee to weigh in if they want to, we learned something yesterday, right? When we break the work that Peter is doing down to sort of our subcommittee level and have then more detailed conversations, there's learning in that as well. So I encourage you, if your subcommittee hasn't had that individual time with Peter to look in precise terms at your work, I'd encourage you to do so as soon as you can. Stephen, any comments from you or others who are on the call, Danielle, others?
Yes, I would agree with what you just said. I guess the only thing that I would add, and if you recall the smaller system map that Peter showed, understanding that system map is really, from what I recall, internally facing. And so, if structure and policies change internally, the impacts that has externally, but then, the question is, how is influence then, how does the county also influence the external factors, probably going back to what Danielle shared with municipalities and other entities, and how can the county play a role in either directly through requirements and contracts or indirectly through best practices as the county sort of built up its equity capacity. So I guess that's sort of what I gathered from yesterday's discussion.
No, that was an important discovery, absolutely. Anyone else? Any other questions for Peter?
No questions, Chair Taylor, but just one other observation from our meeting, and that was the issue of the impact of, from the HR perspective, training and investments that occur within the county system can have a longer reaching and a ripple effect to other organizations within the community, because as people may leave and go to other organizations, they take that institutional knowledge with them. So that was sort of an aha, for me in our meeting. And I think the other issue that was brought up was the importance of trust, and the big importance of trust around the contracting piece, and what we had a good discussion about. And I think it was already sort of brought up a little bit today in terms of what does the county have the ability to influence versus what does it have the ability to enforce. And one of the things that we know about the corporate community is the corporate community in other issues of adhering to new kinds of standards. One thing that we find that they respond to often is a sort sort of competitive nature where there's a gold standard, a silver standard, a bronze standard of participation, and there are going to be those who are going to vie to be in the highest tiers. And so we might think about, as we put these strategies together, how do we incent that participation by creating those opportunities to be layered so that, you know, folks want to be there. They want to participate at those levels.
That was superb. Thank you for that, Ms. Maccabee. Absolutely superb in terms of some of what we came away with. Peter, it's been a hard sale for some folks around systems mapping, but I thought yesterday was a breakthrough in so many ways. So for hanging in there with us and continuing to provide what is wonderful insight. Any other comments, thoughts, or questions for Peter? Okay. Thank you once again, and we'll look forward to these continued conversations. Let me just say before we talk about next steps, the communications subcommittee is working as well. So between Phyllis and that team, along with Eliza and her team within the county, we've got more updates that are coming. We are going to perhaps try to do more community conversations sometime soon. We still have to assemble from our prior conversations and figure out what that means as an input to the work going forward. So lots happening within communications, more to come, and what we'll hear or read sometime soon is just a brief update, probably from me after I work with the subcommittee chairs on a collection of what the next steps are for these subcommittees, just so that you have it in an easily readable form. Naila, what are we missing before we adjourn?
You are not. I was just going to share the same thing about the communications subcommittee, but nothing. I know there's been some suggestions, Chair Taylor, about sort of creating a more regular meeting schedule. I don't know if that's something you want to talk about or how you want to do that.
I think everybody would appreciate that. Absolutely.
And you know what, excuse me, just before we jump into that, would it be okay if I just add on that committee, so I just wanted to add a few little points.
Please do.
If that's okay.
That would be wonderful, I think. Yes, please.
Okay, I'm sorry, this will be very brief, but we did meet last week, and we just briefly talked about the previous community conversations and what we could do differently moving forward. So we definitely want to engage more youth into the conversation. So we're looking at reaching out to school systems, youth organizations, and even some multi-system involved youth, just to get different perspectives. So that was one of the things that we spoke about. We spoke about the conversations, what we learned, what were the questions that were originally asked, and then also what can we learn from those questions, and then kind of what we've learned, pulling out the key themes from those questions to actually craft more specific questions. So that was kind of a discussion moving forward. We talked about possibly having some virtual town halls. And there was an excellent suggestion, and I'm going to pull her out here, just even though she's not on the council. Laura Black mentioned possibly you having the subcommittee do specific town halls specific to those topics, which really kind of mainstreams more of the conversation. So we talked about that as well. And then it was interesting because the internal equity group has already released their report along with our report. And there are some similarities. So we spoke about possibly looking at both reports, seeing what similarities are there, and maybe having in the future some conversations about those two reports, what key themes or issues or concerns that arise, because I think at this point we definitely want to operate in a collaborative manner as opposed to operating in silos. So I just wanted to put that out there. I apologize that just for stepping forward, but I just wanted to bring some of those key points to the council today. Thank you.
And no apology needed. That was, thank you for that, because those are important takeaways from that committee meeting for the time that I was on it. So no, I do appreciate that input and that update. It's critical to the going forward. Naila, you were going to offer something else?
No, I was just going to say I was going to basically say exactly what you said. ditto, no apologies.
Go ahead. If you'd like to repeat it, go ahead.
Thank you, I do. Thank you. Marcia's cracking up right now. So thank you, Levine. To underscore what Chair Taylor said, we greatly appreciate you coming forward and sharing those comments with us.
All right. So
but we were going to talk about, the regular meeting, Chair Taylor. What do you want to do, or how do you want to proceed with that?
I saw heads nod. I saw thumbs up when we said, let's get a regular schedule together. So we can do it. We're not going to do it right now, right? We're not going to poll calendars, but if between you and Laura and others, if you could get us, and the county, schedules have to align, right, with the county executive as well. I think the sooner the better for all of us, right? Even if you throw dates out there and we say yay or nay, and through the polling process, and then we'll figure it out. Is that reasonable for everyone? I mean, we've talked about it. We just need to get 2021 scheduled, as it turns out.
Okay. Yeah. We will work on that for sure.
Okay. And timed around, we need another report release mid-year. So we will have intervening meetings, right, for subcommittees in particular. But let's get the broad group together, timed around the release of reports or just after.
Taylor and Nyla, could I just offer that because the public views, both of these entities for the city and for the county, if we could avoid the second and fourth Wednesdays of the month in the afternoon. Those are, that is the RAFC for City of Cleveland group.
Okay. Perfect. I kind of like this time. I mean, does this like 10 to 12 work for people? Usually maybe we'll try to find something around now if it can. Get in the morning. Okay.
All right, before we part, anything else for the good of this group or the community, as it were, that you heard?
I do have one question for, I guess it would be for Marcia and Danielle. Might there be a point where we get an update from you all on sort of what's happening with the city's committee on, declaring racism as a public health crisis? I don't know how often they've met or if they have any aims or objectives, but it might be worthwhile to hear how you all are coming along. Any thoughts on that?
So Randy, I'm going to answer is I'm not sure that people know, but I'm actually the co-chair of that work for the city, and Eddie and I just talked yesterday about the fact he requested that we have some dialogue about that very issue of, how to share information. So we'll be, getting together and doing that. I'm seeing more and more at every meeting how there is much benefit, especially now as I see cases starting to look outward. All of our work in the beginning was very inward, and now we're seeing that our work has to include an outward touch as well. And so I think there's going to be even more and more points of possible collaboration, and certainly things that can inform the work of each other. So anxious to do that.
Excellent. I was just going to defer to Marcia. So great job, Marcia.
Well, thank you.
Great question, Randy, and Marcia and Danielle are on it. So thank you both.
Okay, well, unless there's further business to discuss, I'd like to adjourn this meeting at 11:58 in the morning. I again thank you very, very much for your dedication and commitment to this extremely important work. We have done much in a very short amount of time, and I look forward to our continued work together throughout 2021. So everyone have a great rest of the day and week. For those of us who work for the county, have a great day off on Monday. Not that I'm excited about that, but I am. Executive booth. So everyone enjoy.
Okay. Thank you all. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
The clerk's office is open.
No, we're not.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.